All right, hello and welcome everyone to week 2 of Introduction to Birding. Just as a reminder, if you weren't here last week, if you have any questions throughout, just type it up in the chat box. I have it open, I'll see it. We have our first optional hike as part of this course on Saturday, December 13th, so that's this coming Saturday. We'll meet at Clermont Park at 9:30 a.m. and probably finish up about 11 a.m. We're not going to do a super intense hike. And just work on, a little bit of some birding skills. So that's at Clermont Park, which is connected or very close to Pattison Park. So if you go on our website, you can find the address for it. And then next Thursday, so not this coming one, but the Thursday after, we are participating in the Audubon Society's Christmas bird count. That'll be on December 18th, 9 to 11:30 a.m. There is a registration form on there because we will be providing some hot chocolate and coffee at the beginning, so we need to know how many we need to buy for. But that one you can choose to either join the team at Catherine Stagmar Park, which is up in Goshen, or at Grailville Nature Preserve, which is over in Loveland. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into week 2. So first of all, we're going to go over our tool highlight of the week. We're going to talk about field guides. We're going to go over some water birds this week, talk about our birding spot of the week, and also talk about being a bird friend. So, as far as field guides go, there are a lot out there. These are some recommendations over here on the left of what type of field guide you might be looking for, depending on your level of birding or how intense you want to get. So we have the Ohio Division of Wildlife makes these Ohio-specific field guides. This is the Water Birds of Ohio field guide. It has a lot of species in it, but it's very nice. It is, you've got a nice picture and then a little blurb about each animal. And they do that for all kinds of natural resources we have here. One of the more popular makers of field guides is Peterson. So some of the things you want to pay attention to when you're looking at figuring out what field guide you want to use. You're going to look at the region that it's covering. So this one is Eastern and Central North America, whereas this one is also Peterson. This is just just Eastern North America. So, there will be some differences in the amount of birds that are actually in there. You also want to pay attention to the scope of what it is covering. So this one is from the Audubon Society. It is a master guide to birding that only covers loons and sandpipers. So that's a little bit more of a specific one. On just one moment, I lost my chat box. There we go. So just in Ohio, we have over 130 species that can be found of water birds, and that sounds overwhelming. It's not quite as crazy as you think it might be. We're not going to go over all of them. This can include ducks, gulls, pipers, loons. There's a lot of crossover with, birds we've talked about in the past, so that includes osprey and eagles and those kind of water hunting birds. And then there are also some songbirds that are considered water birds as well that'll be lumped in with those field guides. Just to give you kind of an idea of the scope, these are all water birds. there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there. So we're gonna jump in to going over these birds. You've got wood ducks, are one of my favorite water birds that we have here. I think they are super fun. They're definitely a smaller bird and not as commonly seen. And they're not commonly seen, not because that they're rare or endangered. They're actually doing really well numbers wise. They almost did go extinct in the early 1900s, but we brought them back. But it's hard to find them because they are very skittish. So you're more likely to see, maybe the tail feathers of one flying away. But they're a really cool bird. You'll usually find them in streams, rivers, swamps, marshes. They do like the Ohio River. They have a smaller foot. They actually will nest in trees. So if you have a nice big body of water, a nice big pond near you, you can put up a wood duck box. That's just a built box for them to nest in. It kind of helps give them some more spaces to nest. Mallards are, the bird. When you think of a mallard, or when you think of a duck, that's the mallard. You'll find them pretty much everywhere. They're a pretty easy one to come across. Now, the females are more vocal than the males for mallards. That really, really loud quack that you think of, or that you always kind of hear when you think of a duck, that's actually made by the female. The male has kind of a more deep, like throaty quack. But they are breeding here. They stick around and breed. There are some that migrate. But yeah, they're just kind of a classic duck. And then you've got the ring-necked duck. This is our smallest diving duck in North America. So with ducks, there are dabbling ducks and diving ducks. Dabbling ducks just put their little bill in on the surface of the water and dabble up the food. They'll also do that like flip, so their little duck tail is up in the air. And there's diving ducks, and those are ducks that actually dive fully under the water to go get their food. So ringneck ducks are a diving duck. They, however, are a little bit more similar to dabbling ducks in their flight abilities. So a lot of diving ducks have to kind of get a running start in order to take off. Ringneck ducks can just take off straight into the air. They do not nest here. They're just winter visitors. They kind of migrate through. There haven't been any records of them actually nesting in Ohio, so you're probably not going to hear them a lot. With a lot of ducks, they're only vocal when they are, somewhere where they're going to be nesting, because that's when they do most of their communication. But you can tell on I'm not into, I never have been able to figure out why they're called ring-necked ducks, because they don't really have a distinct ring on their neck. They do have this ring on their bill. There are these two rings on their bill. And then the female has these nice brown eyes and a little bit of a white stripe on the end of her bill. We also have bufflehead ducks. Buffleheads are also a cavity nesting duck. They're also a pretty tiny duck. They're sometimes called butterballs. And they have this kind of almost a hood on the back of their head with those feathers. The female bufflehead duck has a nice white cheek patch on her. That's a pretty iconic look. And it's a pretty unique one as well. These guys you're going to find deep open waters of lakes, big rivers. Occasionally they'll come into like the marshes, but they do tend to prefer like big lakes, big rivers. And their genus name means bull-headed. I guess they thought they looked like a bull. Hooded mergansers. We have, so our mergansers are related to ducks. We actually have 3 different types of mergansers here in Ohio. The hooded, the common, and the red-necked, or red-breasted, sorry. Hoodeds are the ones I have seen by far the most often, but that might just be my luck. They're not the most common in general to be seen, but they've got that big hood on the back with that white patch. And then they're also a cavity nesting duck. So having those duck boxes can help out more than just the wood ducks. They can also get confused with wood ducks in flight. They look very similar. The easiest way to tell the difference is in how they're holding their head. Wood ducks will kind of have their head up slightly in relation to the rest of their body while they're flying. But mergansers hold their head kind of below their body when they're flying. So if you can get a kind of a side view of them as they're flying, that can help you tell the difference between the two. You will see them in lakes, large rivers. They like to breed near marshes and ponds. So down at our last week's birding spot of the week is Crooked Run Nature Preserve. There's a backwater estuary of the Ohio River, and we consistently have wood ducks and hooded mergansers both nesting there. There's also the common merganser. The females actually have this red head with this little bit of a hood on the back. The males are a nice green with that orange bill. They can be very big. So males can get to be over 2 feet long, weigh about 4 pounds, which is a pretty big duck, or pretty big for anything duck related. The common merganser females and red-breasted merganser females are pretty commonly confused. The easiest way to tell them apart is that the common merganser has this nice crisp line on her neck, whereas the hooded or the red-breasted merganser does not have that crisp of a division between the feather colors. And common mergansers prefer deep open waters, big lakes, big rivers. We have a lot of gulls in Ohio. So the term seagull is a little bit of a misleading one. Not all gulls are by the sea. In fact, I would say probably most of them are not. But if you have a big body of water, you're going to have gulls around. These are 2 of the most common ones to see in this area. By no means are they the only gulls that are out there. There's a lot of them, and they are hard to tell apart because they don't stay still for long. Ring-billed gulls have that little ring on the end of their bill. Very useful. Good naming right there. And they will get fewer and fewer spots the older they get. So if you see one that if it looks like a ring-billed gull, if it's got that little ring on its beak, but it has a lot of spots, it's just a juvenile. It's a non-breeding adult. And then we have herring gulls. Those are our second most common gull in Ohio, or in this region to see. They don't have any of that like black striping. If you look at the bottom of their wings, there's quite a big difference in they don't have that big white spot at the tip of their wings. They have a much smaller one. And I believe that herring gulls are smaller than ring-billed, but I could be wrong on that. The gulls are confusing. Spotted sand, so we have some pipers. Think like, the little cute little birds you see by the beach. They like to eat clams and mussels and things like that. Solitary sandpipers are named very aptly. You usually only see one at a time. Maybe you might see a handful, but they're not very close together. They tend to kind of hang out by themselves. They're pretty loners. They are an arboreal nester. So most shorebirds will build their nest on the ground. These guys will actually build a nest up in a tree. They tend to take over abandoned American robin and rusty blackbird nests most commonly, but they have been seen taking over some other nests as well. They love like wooded swamps, wetlands, margins of small ponds, stream corridors. You usually will see them in areas that you're not going to see as many other shorebirds. Then we have the spotted sandpiper. They are one of only 3 commonly nesting shorebirds that we have here in Ohio. The other 2 are the killdeer and American woodcock. Most pipers or most shorebirds do not nest in Ohio, unfortunately. Not sure why. But they have this very distinctive bobbing that they do with their tails. It's called teetering, but they'll raise and lower their tails. It's a form of communication. So that's kind of a good way to tell them apart. And again, they have different levels of spottiness depending on their age. So the juveniles actually have fewer spots, and then they gain their spots as they get older. Are herons. So we have 2 main herons here in Ohio. We've got the great blue heron and the green heron. Big difference in size. So great blue herons are a very large bird. They are probably our most commonly found heron. You usually will, at least for me, I usually hear them before I see them, because usually when I see one, it's because I've upset it. And it's flying away, and it has this very deep kind of croaking call they give as they fly away. They nest up in rookeries, so they will build these kind of colonial nest sites. And some of the bigger ones can contain like hundreds of nests. So they definitely are a very communal bird around nesting time. There is one in on Kelly's Island, which is up in Lake Erie, that had a record of about 2,400 nests in that rookery. They like shallow open water, so more shallow rivers, wetlands, creeks. They like to kind of stand and hunt. They're also very good at perching and camouflaging. They like to pretend that they are not a bird. They are, in fact, a stick. We also have green herons, which are quite a bit smaller than great blue herons. They are largely a migratory bird. You don't usually see them around, except for during migration. They really like streams. This one I got a picture of in a wetland, but usually they're a stream kind of bird. They are pretty smart, so they've actually been observed using tools. They will drop feathers on the surface of the water to kind of give the impression that there's a bug that just landed on the water. And then when a fish comes up to eat that bug, they'll eat the fish. And they have, so unlike the great blue heron, who pretty much always has their neck extended out, they can retract their neck a lot. So this is the the difference in how far they can pull their neck back in and then stretch that out, which is pretty cool. You might see them also in marshes, wetlands, lakes, ponds. They don't nest communally like the great blue herons. They tend to build little flimsy little stick platforms in shrubs, so not even very high. We do have a couple of species of swans that can be seen in Ohio. Mute swans are an introduced species. They were brought over to, you know, beautify an ornamental pond. They are not mute. They have a lot of different noises they make. They hiss, they bugle, they hum. They have lots of different noises that they make. They're considered feral, so they are considered somewhat domesticated over in Europe. And then as they've escaped, they're pretty aggressive. They can cause some problems for native waterfowl. But they're easily identified by that orange beak and black legs. They really like ponds, lake, marshes. Usually you only see mute swans up in the Lake Erie region of Ohio. You usually don't see them around here, but it's not unheard of. We also have trumpeter swans. They are the largest native North American waterfowl. So they are originally from here. They have this fully black beak and black legs. Pretty easy way to tell them apart from a mute swan. Males can weigh up to 23 pounds, which is a very large bird. As a reminder, our great horned owl weighs about like 6 at maximum, like 4 usually. So 23-pound bird is a very large bird. They have a wingspan of up to 7 feet. They did almost go extinct in the early 1900s. A lot of overhunting, feather trade, all of that. But with the conservation efforts that have been made, they're doing pretty good now with their numbers. You usually see them in large marshes. Again, this is also one that you're probably most likely to see up near Lake Erie, and not as likely to see down here in Southwest Ohio. They're a little bit less common this far down. And then some fun others. We have sandhill cranes, which actually I just got word that there were some flying over Batavia just a couple hours ago. So sandhill cranes are one of the coolest migratory birds in my opinion. They have this white or this red top of their head with that white underneath. Usually you hear them before you see them. They fully migrate over this area. They don't really hang out for very long. They have this very loud, like rolling call. They travel in huge flocks. There will be flocks of, you know, anywhere from 20 to 50 to 100. Most often, if you're going to try to see them not in flight, look for fields, old agricultural fields, large marshes. That's a pretty good spot to see them taking a break and getting some food. They're really, really cool migratory bird. They're pretty big. I want to say they're about 4 to 4.5 feet tall when they're standing. It's a decent size. If you see a flock of them going overhead and you aren't totally sure if they're somehow they're not talking, they're always talking. But in case you get a random quiet flock of them, you can also look at their legs because they will hold their legs straight out behind them as they fly, which is not super common for birds of that size. And then we also have double-crested cormorants. This is a diving bird. They will dive fully under the water and fish. They almost went extinct. They were almost decimated by the use of DDT. But again, conservation efforts, the bans on using DDT really had some amazing impacts. They went from about a handful of cormorants in the 60s to over 30,000 just seen around Lake Erie. These guys are pretty common to see down on the Ohio River. They like lakes, ponds, marshes. They like big open waters. So you might run into them down on the Ohio, or in, any sort of large open body of water. They have this orange at the very base of their bill, and they tend to fly very close to the surface of the water, so probably about 3 to 6 feet over the surface of the water. So we have our birding spot of the week. This is Fernald Nature Preserve. This is a former nuclear test site that has been restored. They have very interesting history. They have a nice visitor center there. I highly recommend taking a stroll through that, but it is definitely a birding hotspot, especially for migratory birds. And if you're looking for any sort of water birds, they've got wetlands, forest, field, all of the different habitats. It's over in Hamilton, Ohio. It's a little over 1,000 acres. And there's a 7-mile trail network. So you can take a very long hike or you can take a nice short walk. But you're pretty much guaranteed to see some really cool birds out there. And their logo is a kingfisher, which is another type of water bird that we did not talk about today. Kingfishers are about yay big, probably about maybe a foot tall, if that. And again, usually I see it before I hear it before I see it. But they're a good fisher bird. Hence their name. So a way that you can be a nice bird friend, especially as it's coming on winter now, is to plant native plants. So if you begin the process of kind of replacing some of your turf grass, some of your lawn with native plants, you will see more birds visiting you. You'll see healthier soils. So this right here, this is winterberry. It's a native shrub. You do have to get both a male and a female in order for it to produce these berries, but those are very, very good nutrition source for birds in the winter. This is an eastern red cedar, which is actually in the juniper family. It's not a cedar at all. But those berries provide, again, another very important food source. And it's our only native evergreen tree to Southwest Ohio. So all of those closely interlocked branches and all those needles provide a nice shelter spot. And then this is a smooth hydrangea, which is our native hydrangea. It's really good for pollinators. So even if you get a plant that's not producing berries, if you get a plant that is producing nectar or attracting pollinators to lay their eggs on them, caterpillars are basically walking granola bars for birds. So having a variety of food sources is really good. Again, it can provide shelter. Putting in some nice native grasses, or having an area that you don't mow, or that you only mow once a year, provides space for some birds to nest. Especially some of our ground nesters like the killdeer. They really need that kind of covered space where they can tuck in and hide. And another benefit of having some nice thick native plants is actually, it does the opposite for Canada geese. So Canada geese like to lay their eggs where they can see everything. They don't really like to be kind of tucked in. So if you have a pond that tends to get Canada geese, if you let that riparian zone, that area around the banks, grow out and have native plants, you will not have as many goose problems. It also improves your soil health, which does help birds. So having more native plants, those deep root systems help to kind of filter out the groundwater that's running off into the creeks. Especially for our water birds, they need some nice, clean, fresh water in order to thrive. And it also helps hold your soil in place. So native plants will have very, very deep, complex, intertwining root systems that will get down into the groundwater, so you don't have to water them when it gets really dry in August. And those really, really thickly placed root systems help hold your soil down, so you're not getting erosion happening. So there's a lot of really cool native plants out there. If you're interested in learning more about native plants, there's a lot of really good webinars and classes and all kinds of things that you can take to learn about how to best go about that. All right, so a little bit of a short one today.